We've gotten some really interesting material from you all about why people might leave the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, quite a mix. Research papers, personal stories, even the official stance.
So our mission today is basically to unpack that, to
Hmm.
really get to the heart of the reasons people choose to disaffiliate from this particular group.
And it's interesting because while the Jehovah's Witnesses certainly have unique beliefs and practices, some reasons for leaving, well, they echo why people leave other faiths too.
That's a good starting point.
Hmm.
So before we zero in on the witnesses, what are some of those sort of general reasons people step away from religion?
Well, a big one is often intellectual. People feel they've maybe outgrown the beliefs they were raised with, or they encounter new information, science perhaps, that clashes. Cognitive dissonance is the term, right?
Right, that internal conflict. And sadly, sometimes it's much darker things like religious trauma or abuse.
Absolutely. Either direct experience or seeing hypocrisy, maybe from leaders, that shatters trust.
And what about social factors? Things are changing fast culturally.
Definitely. Conflicts over evolving values, like LGBTQ plus rights or gender roles, can be a major issue. Sometimes communities just feel unwelcoming or maybe too politicized. We see that across different religions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or even personal tragedy where the religious explanations just don't satisfy or comfort.
Precisely. And sometimes the label itself becomes problematic for people. Plus, just not feeling connected, not finding that community feel. Or maybe the religious ties weren't that strong to begin with in childhood.
And life just gets busy. Secular priorities pull you away.
Exactly. Modern life demands a lot of time and energy. Okay, so bearing all that general context in mind,
Let's zoom in. Jehovah's Witnesses specifically. What are the unique challenges or doctrines that seem to push people away?
okay, so doctrinal points are definitely key. Their view of God isn't Trinitarian. They see Jesus as distinct from and subordinate to God. That's a major difference from mainstream Christianity.
And their Bible translation, the New World Translation.
Yes, that specific translation draws criticism for, well, alleged alterations that support their doctrines. Then there's the strong focus on Armageddon being imminent, and the belief only 144,000 go to heaven.
While most followers hope for paradise on earth, right?
Correct. That whole framework is quite distinct.
And the lifestyle rules are pretty demanding, aren't they?
Oh, very. No birthdays, no Christmas or Easter seen as having pagan origins. Strict political neutrality, so no voting, no saluting the flag, no military service.
Plus the mandatory door-to-door ministry.
Right, that's a huge commitment. And they generally discourage independent Bible study or research outside of materials from the Watchtower Society. It feels quite controlled to some.
And the blood transfusion ban. That's a really difficult one.
It is. It's an absolute refusal based on their reading of Scripture, and it leads to incredibly tough ethical situations, sometimes tragic ones, especially involving children.
Then there's disfellowshipping. Can you explain that?
Sure. It's essentially excommunication for what they see as serious unrepentant sin, but crucially, it's coupled with shunning.
Shunning meaning.
Meaning members, even close family, are instructed to cut off virtually all social contact with a disfellowship person or even someone who voluntarily disassociates themselves. The emotional impact is devastating for many.
I can only imagine that social death must be incredibly painful. And there have been controversies about handling abuse allegations.
Yes, significant ones. Their reliance on the two-witness rule, requiring a second witness unless there's a confession, has been heavily criticized. Investigations are handled internally by elders, which has raised concerns, leading to inquiries in places like Australia and the UK.
What about prophecies? I've heard mention of dates that came and went.
That's another factor. There's a history of specific predictions, particularly about the world's end, that didn't happen. The organization explains these as adjustments or new light, but for some it can erode trust over time.
And the overall structure. You mentioned control earlier.
It's very centralized. A governing body makes doctrinal and organizational decisions for the worldwide community. There's little room for independent interpretation, which some find stifling.
And that links back to the social isolation too, doesn't it? The no part of the world idea.
Exactly. It limits deep friendships with non-witnesses, restricts involvement in many secular activities. It can lead to real loneliness even within the community. Plus, that constant focus on Armageddon can create underlying anxiety.
So hearing from former members, what themes keep coming up?
A lot talk about that cognitive dissonance we mentioned, a growing unease, feeling they lacked genuine choice growing up in the faith. Concerns about how abuse is handled are frequent, and just a deep desire for a normal life, free from the constant restrictions and the fear.
And the shunning seems central to the pain of leaving.
Overwhelmingly so. Research actually points to a fairly low retention rate, suggesting many raised as witnesses don't stay. It's sometimes called a high-cost religion because the price of leaving is so steep, impacting mental health and life satisfaction significantly.
So the main points of friction seem to be theology, the blood issue, abuse handling, the authoritarian structure, and definitely shunning.
Those are certainly the big ones that surface repeatedly in criticisms and testimonies.
Of course, the organization has its own perspective on why people leave and on these practices.
They do. They frame leaving often as disassociation, a deliberate choice. Disfellowshipping is presented as scripturally mandated to keep the congregation clean. And shunning, while acknowledged as difficult, is seen as a form of discipline rooted in love, potentially motivating someone to return.
And they'd emphasize freedom of choice.
Yes, that individuals choose whether to worship according to their standards or not.
Okay, so wrapping this up,
Yeah.
it's really clear leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses isn't usually about just one thing. It's complex.
Absolutely. It's a mix of doctrine, practice, social dynamics, personal experience, often a very difficult personal journey.
And it takes real courage to step away, especially given the potential consequences like shunning.
It does. And it's worth noting there are support networks out there now, especially online, for people navigating that transition. Places like the XJW subreddit offer community.
A really insightful deep dive. Thanks for breaking that down. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Think about that tension, that balance, in any group, really, between what the community expects and an individual's own sense of self and autonomy. What allows someone to feel they truly belong versus what might push them to the edge feeling alienated, something to mull over.